let's get to the Ray Peat diet. So I used to meticulously edit anybody on the podcast that would say Ray Peat diet. I would edit it out because it really, being in the diet scene for so long, from like 2007, 2008, 9, and 10, from going to first like a vegetarian style diet and then to vegan diet and then to like paleo and then zero carb, the meat and water style zero carb, and then introducing starches into my diet. It really shook the idea that sticking to some arbitrary perfect diet was going to solve my complex health problems. And also I saw a lot of like unwellness. I felt, oh no, my Streamlabs thing. I felt like a lot of unwellness in the health sphere. And so it wasn't something I had lots of confidence in after a while. And so when I bumped into Ray, it was like a breath of fresh air because he was saying that some foods are more anti-inflammatory and have natural anti-stress properties than other foods. But I never got from him that like sticking to some arbitrary perfect diet was the solution to everything. And so the things that I feel like I have learned from him over the years, like a favorable calcium to phosphorus ratio. And so when somebody is emailing me, that's very often something that's really in discordance. Is that the right way of saying that? And the phosphorus will be way higher than the calcium. And again, I think the high phosphate, Ray and I talk about it in one of our podcasts, but he says it's like a disorganizer, like it causes basically cells to lose their coherence and start taking up water and entering like the incoherent stress state. And another way of saying that is it turns on like the parathyroid hormone, and it's something that's not very controversial. Like even somebody like I made a video about Paul Saladino of the carnivore diet. The one point that we were in agreement was that calcium was very important, and it's not something that's often being talked about in the health sphere. And I feel so passionate about it because it was a element of the diet that I neglected for so long. Like I never focused on getting calcium basically at all until I encountered Ray's work, and I thought it was funny because I had neglected it for so long. And of course, you could go get your parathyroid hormone measured. You could go to a lab, get that measured, and that could inform your own calcium intake. But I think around 1,500 or 2,000 milligrams per day is a pretty good target. And of course, the saturated fat, I won't bore you guys too much, but the saturated fat versus unsaturated fat, like I don't know if anybody's worked out the exact number of grams of unsaturated fat. Of course, Ray is famous for that 4 grams of unsaturated fat, but just focusing on a higher proportion of saturated fat to unsaturated fat, of course, sugars over starches, and that having a bunch of anti-stress properties, and the fructose bypassing some parts of glycolysis that are blocked by the Randle cycle. I think that, I forget what stage it is, like the PFK-1 part of glycolysis. And the production of carbon dioxide being not just essential for the utilization of oxygen, but also having like an anti-lipid peroxidation effect, which my buddy Kyle Mamounis has talked about in his presentations. And yeah, we won't get too deep in the weeds in that. Adequate protein, like 80 to 100 grams, and there are a few papers that talk about, and this isn't very controversial, even in the bodybuilding world. I think they have an emphasis on protein. Of course, the regular supplemental foods like liver, oysters, and eggs, that's something that's like frequently missing. I feel like I could make a video a week for the rest of my life about oysters and liver, and people would still avoid them. Salting to taste, and salt having a therapeutic anti-aldosterone, anti-prolactin effect, and like maybe a daily antiseptic fiber such as well-cooked white button mushrooms or the carrot. And of course, all of these dietary things don't exist outside the context of the metabolic rate. And so somebody's 40 years old and they've accumulated lots of polyunsaturated fats, they've accumulated lots of stressors over a lifetime. Like a diet will do only so much. And so I think that is really where taking thyroid can be really useful. And I posted something about this on my Twitter not too long ago. But so if you look at these like before and after photos, like I just don't know of a therapy that can do this type of thing, like another therapy that can do this type of thing. And so I think it's really worth, dialing in your thyroid dose. And of course, a person should read Rhoda Barnes's book, Hypothyroidism, the Unsuspected Illness, but I think this is just one of the most important therapies, you know, and it's not automatic. I think it takes a lot of dedication and attention. And I think when somebody is maybe not really sure of what they're doing, the thyroid can be a very confusing aspect to integrate. And so again, I think accumulating lots of information about thyroid hormone, its historical precedent for using it and things like that, I think that is very important. Michael says, bring Kyle back. We just need something to talk about. Thanks, guys, everybody, for hanging out. So again, the temperature, when somebody says, hey, you know, I did the Ray Peat diet, didn't make me feel too good. I think it's important to, again, the temperature and pulse rate are some of the most important elements of the Ray Peat diet. And again, the nutrition doesn't exist outside of that. And so there are many things to do. There are many possibilities of integration and things like that. But again, this it tends to get reduced because the diet scene is so the nutritional health scene is so diet focused. All of Ray's like complexity and the work that he does tends to get reduced down to like a Coke, milk, and orange juice diet, and it's just kind of how it is, or I guess like it is what it is. But anyways, so again, yeah, these nutritional things are things you can incorporate that are widely available that tend to have anti-inflammatory, anti-stress effects. And again, a person's diet will be different depending on where they are. My nutrition was different in Japan than it was in Malaysia, than it was in Mexico, than it is in Thailand. It just depends what I have access to, and I try to do the best I can, you know. So yeah. Okay, what else? If just to tag along on this subject, my friend Karen just wrote an amazing article back in like 2015 called "Stop Repeating." And she says, if you are reading this and you want to learn more about this intelligent man, you may come upon chat groups that are dedicated to learning more. You'll come across the term peating, and it means something like you only drink milk, eat certain fruits, and avoid polyunsaturated fats with the religious fervor of a nun who avoids relations. You might find it all a little scary, actually. However, I would like to throw my hat into the ring and weigh in on this, not to hurt anyone's feelings, but for the sake of discussion. Maybe it could be of some help to people. If peating really is your intended goal, in order to have a complete experience of peating, you would have to continually keep the big picture in mind like he does. You would have to be of service to your fellow humans, asking for nothing in return. You would study firsthand other scientists and philosophers and make interesting connections that give you a comprehensive view of life. You would also write and paint and have a strong connection to nature, as well as value humor. That would truly be peating. And there's one other thing I wanted to touch. Okay, I'll just keep reading. She says, you may also hear the term Peatarian, but remember that Jesus was not a Christian, Buddha was not a Buddhist, and Ray Peat is not a Peatarian. Ray Peat is someone who stands for an authentic life and who does not want to reinforce the imposed system. He recognizes that our dignity, and he recognizes our dignity and thinks we are capable of greater freedoms and a much fuller experience of life. We're speaking of someone who wrote the following. For Pavlov, the study of psychology or physiology was without consciousness was simply crazy. Pavlov said that he studied nutrition and to understand consciousness and the nervous system. Because eating is our closest interaction with the world, our brain is part of our digestive system. But eating has become highly institutionalized and influenced by our cultural beliefs. If people begin to think about the meaning of eating, they are beginning a process of cultural and philosophical criticism. He also wrote, when a person is allowed to function freely as a goal-oriented questioning system, the formation patterns in the brain will be spontaneous and appropriate and orderly. So why then would anyone think that Dr. Peat wants to take on our interactions with the world for us and direct our eating? Why would someone who has done so many self-experiments and learned in various ways what is the best way to eat for himself deny us our journey and have us take his word for it? So that's something that resonates with me. It's you can only kind of teach somebody at their own pace, and this is extremely true of me. In fact, when I read this article in 2015, I thought Karen was like way off the mark, and I think this article clashed with like who I was in 2015, like the Ray Peat guy, and I didn't really like it. But over time, I I think this happens with all Karen's work because she's usually way ahead of me, and so this was just something that settled in over time. And again, like when like Ray is communicating with somebody and maybe they don't understand something, he won't like stop them and drill something into the individual, you know. And I think that's because everybody's on their own pace. They're learning at their own rate. And in fact, like I can recall a time when I was talking to a close friend who seemed to have lots of digestive issues, and he was like just getting into Ray's work, and he was telling me all of his issues on the phone. I was like, oh, I wonder if like if the carrot salad or white button mushrooms didn't work, maybe an antibiotic would work. But you could tell he just like wasn't really like ready to hear that, and I think he still came from the background of thinking that antibiotics were very bad. But like I think 4 months later he called me and he was like, you know what, I think antibiotics would really help me. and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And so again, it was just a person learning at their own rate, and it's hard to like force information when it's not relevant. In fact, I think Ray has that quote, something like the information is only relevant if it's like answer to a burning question or something like that. I forget. But anyways, okay. And also this ties into what we were talking about. These are a few Ray quotes that I put in here. And Ray says, without a realistic view of where you are, you can't expect to go anywhere. And again, this quote resonates with me a lot because I don't mean to like black pill everyone, but I think people don't understand how bad their health is, you know, especially when they're experiencing some degenerative problem. And also I don't think they understand how bad the environment is. And so again, I'm like sitting here and I'm around probably like 100 Wi-Fi modems, you know, and I know there are like EMF skeptics, but I'm not one of them. And so again, I'm in Bangkok and the pollution is just terrible. And I have this huge mask that I wear outside. So again, Bangkok is like an extreme example of a really bad environment. But again, I don't think people understand, just even if you were in a better environment than this, I think it's still not optimal and it's still not supportive of kind of our physiology. And so I think that again, and this comes with time, you don't really immediately understand how bad things are, but yeah, I think it settles in over time. And just like keeping with, there's no such thing as like a Ray Peat diet, or that phrase is at best totally useless. Somebody wrote to Ray and they were saying like, I'm not losing weight, but I'm taking aspirin, I'm taking thyroid, I'm doing your diet and things. And he said keeping the metabolic rate up is the main thing, and there's lots of ways to do it. And so again, there are I posted this on my Twitter. But there are many ways to increase the metabolism: nutrition, red light, altitude, living, stimulating life, thyroid, aspirin, vitamin D, increasing bowel movements, etc. And where was I? And so again, there are many ways to do a similar thing. And of course, as I said earlier, I think taking thyroid is one of the most like powerful ways to do that. But yeah, and again, this I think, like, if you compare and contrast different dietary styles, I think often they will have a pro-metabolic feature sometimes, you know? So that is just something to think about. Okay, we won't go over. Also, I was perusing the Ray Peat forum, and somebody was saying like, and I get this question often, like, if you think that your diet is good, why do you need the drugs? And this is the reason. One, drugs is kind of a loaded term, and somebody wouldn't think twice about eating liver or oysters. But if you take thyroid hormone, suddenly you're a drug addict, or you're seeking something that's like cocaine or something. And so again, as far as I know, in America, the FDA made selling the thyroid gland illegal in the 80s or 1985 or so. And so I think taking thyroid is the next best thing to eating the gland, and it's just way easier. You know, I had somebody that actually took the gland, and it was extremely difficult to dose. And again, we're talking about, like, I feel like my work is for really like it's like for sick people. I'm not catering to like elite athletes, that's not my forte or who I think I speak to, you know. And so when somebody is doesn't like talking about substances that can be helpful, I mean, you can have like a naturalistic type of view that you can only use natural things, but again, something like cyproheptadine, not natural, but very safe and can be useful. Something like aspirin, not natural, but can be extremely useful. And so again, I think the polyunsaturated fats in our tissues aren't natural, you know, and our environment isn't natural. And so it just doesn't, that naturalistic argument, I think, is doesn't make much sense.